All right, we are now recording. Great. So, okay, looking at the resume, there are kind of four key areas that consulting firms are looking at and they're hoping to see. Obviously, so that's academics, professional experience, service and volunteering, and your interests. And so we're going to do a deep dive into these things as we go forward. But then shifting over to the cover letter, we're going to look at how you fit the firm, how you can make an impact at the firm, and how the firm fits you. So really, what do you bring to the table? How are you going to be an asset? And what does that company fit look like? At that dynamic. But as we consider both of these things, and as you work on really framing these powerful resumes and cover letters, keep in mind these like core overarching attributes and skills that consulting firms are looking for that are here in the middle. Things such as problem solving, leadership, creativity, analytical skills, passions, the ability to impact, and others that you might be able to think of, because that's the goal here. That's what they're looking for. They want problem solvers. They want leaders. And these other aspects from your resume and your cover letter are really just helping them know, do you really embody these different characteristics? So moving on here, we will get into the grill of the resume. So for me, the grill, this is the framing, the formatting, the aesthetics of your resume. And we won't spend too much time here because I want to be able to get into the meat and the cooking, but a few things I wanted to point out. So first is consistency. One amazing thing, or one thing that will really help you stand out, is being consistent with your resume, with your formatting, with your fonts, where things are, like the location of, a certain experience, the dates of a certain experience, how you're framing your bullets, always starting with a past tense verb, just being consistent, because then like if you have something that's inconsistent, it's going to stand out. And the whole point of like these points we're going to talk through is like, you don't want like little mistakes and little things that are just different that stand out in your resume. They can be like red flags. They can kind of distract from like the meat of like what you actually want them to see. Second is flawless grammar. And, again, this is where like you do not want any grammar mistakes, no misspellings. You don't want commas that you're not supposed to have, or like missing a comma that you should have. Again, these are things that distract from how amazing you are as a candidate and having them come to understand that. And moving on to logical organization. So we're going to talk about this a lot during this presentation, but consultants love structure. They love organization. And that applies to your resume and your cover letter as well, as we will get into, with how you order your sections, how you're organizing your experiences, how you're organizing the bullets within your experiences. You want that to be logical. There's not necessarily a right or wrong way to do everything, but you want to make sure that like way you are organizing it is logical. Clear headings, you want to make sure it's really easy to follow. People know, what they're looking at different parts of your resume. Aesthetic bullet lengths. So you don't want bullets on your resume that just bleed on to like a second line with just like one or two words. Like that's kind of what I mean by that. You want them to be like full lines, as full as you can get, because it just makes the like white space look a little funky and can kind of just like ruin the aesthetics of your resume if you had a lot of bullets that just bleed over with just one or two words. And then the overall goal of all this is just simplicity, being easy on the eyes. You want your resume to be easy to look at, easy to follow, easy to see, okay, this is education, this is experience, this is the interest, and be able to have them find the things that they're looking for without too much difficulty. So shifting now to the next section, getting into the meat. This is the good stuff. This is what we're looking for. So again, these four sections that we talked about. So starting with academics, you're obviously you're going to want your GPA test scores on there. For MBB, at least, kind of like the benchmark that they're hoping for is a 3.8 GPA or higher and a 30 or higher on the ACT. Does not mean that you're automatically disqualified if you don't have a 3.8 or you don't have a 30. But you're going to have to compensate a little bit more in other areas if that is the case. And obviously you can do that through experiences, through different service and volunteering and leadership opportunities you've had. You can demonstrate that on your resume and as well on your cover letter in particular, which we will talk about a little bit later. Also to include in your academic section, scholarships you've received, club involvement, other academic awards and achievements. You could include like case, competition, participation in the academic section if you'd like. So that's kind of like the high level view over here of the academics. So jumping now to the professional experience. Obviously, like they're not expecting a ton, especially if you're coming in as like an intern, if you're applying for the internship. But you know, they do want to have, or do want to see at least 1 to 2 impactful experiences. And kind of like a guideline that they use for, you know, sifting through these experiences and seeing how applicable they're going to be or how helpful they're going to be as far as determining how good you are as an applicant, is if they're big name and or big impact experiences. So what do I mean by that? So big name experiences are like if you have like an internship at Apple, right, or Google or Nike, you know, these companies that people know. You see the name, you know it. And these can be helpful because they serve like as an initial vetting for you. You know, BCG, seeing that, you know, if you had interned at Apple, knows like, hey, this person's already been through the interview process at Apple. Apple said that they were worth hiring, and, you know, like they did a great job while they were there. So like, that's very helpful. So that's the big name part. Big impact is maybe you're working at a smaller company, a startup, or a more local organization, but you have an outsized impact. You know, you increase sales by 20%, or, you know, you completely run the like IT department at that company. You know, again, so I'm not going to recognize the name, but like, this is where you gain like very valuable experiences that will teach you a lot of these skills that they're looking for. So sometimes you can get the combo of a big name and a big impact experience, but like odds are like you're not increasing sales by 20% at Apple. Like, good for you if you're doing that. But, you know, typically you want to have either big name or big impact. And just to like reiterate this, they don't have to be related to consulting. I feel like I have a lot of people who talk to me who stress about getting some sort of like sophomore consulting internship, or, you know, like they're a little late to the game and, you know, they've never done anything consulting. Like, that's totally fine. Like, they're not expecting you to have consulting related experience when you're going into it. And then the last point here, quality is definitely more important than quantity. It's better to have 1 or 2 experiences that are deeper. You show how you progressed and things that you learned, skills that you developed, versus listing like 5 experiences where it's more superficial. Like, you weren't able to develop, you know, good relationships with the people there. You weren't as impactful at that company just because you were there just for a little bit of time. You know, definitely you want to prioritize and emphasize those longer experiences that you had where you had a bigger impact. Jumping up to service and volunteering. So consultants, I feel like in my interactions that I've had with other consultants seems to be like genuinely good people who want to make a positive impact on the world. And, you know, that includes going the extra mile and being passionate about different things. And consulting firms want to see that in you. They want to see that you are willing to take the initiative and, you know, seek for and thrive in leadership opportunities, whether that be in a club, another organization in your community, a nonprofit. You know, they want to see those attributes and characteristics in you. And then last but not least, your interests. Consultants are real people. They, I feel like, are often very interesting, fun people. Honestly, like the thing that I probably loved the most about my internship last summer at BCG was just interacting with my team. Because not only were they extremely bright and hardworking and incredible to work with as far as our project went, they were fun people to be with. You know, I enjoyed going to team dinners with them, doing team events, socializing. And those are the kind of people they're looking for. They want like cool social nerds, as sometimes, you know, we'll say at BCG. And including interests on your resume can help foster connections with your recruiters and people you're networking with, and help them come to know you better as a person. The airport test is kind of another way to put this. If you haven't heard of the airport test before, it's basically if I was stuck in an airport with you for like 5 hours, let's say like our flight got delayed, would I rather talk to you because I think you're interesting? Or would I rather pretend to be asleep because I don't really want to talk to you? Now, obviously, you don't really want to fall in that second bucket. You want to be the person they want to talk to because you're interesting. You don't want to just be another applicant. You want to stand out. So, okay, all right, that is the meat. So now we're going to move on to the cooking. So for me, it's a nice like medium well steak, juicy, not overcooked, not like raw and rare like some people like it. Not a big fan of that. So as far as the resume goes, I think there's 2 key areas here that I wanted to highlight as far as like the cooking, how you're going to frame this good content that you have. That's verbs and impact. As far as verbs go, you should pretty much always start your bullets with a past tense verb. If you want to start with like an adverb, that's probably okay. Otherwise, I'd stick to past tense verbs. You want to avoid vague verbs whenever possible. So verbs like helped, like we're going to see in a second with an example. You'll typically, or you will often follow a structure of I accomplished X by doing Y. So it's a great way to be specific with like what you actually did and how you did it. So kind of jumping into this example here, so kind of a poor example of a resume bullet would be I helped find and analyze potential investments. If this was talking about me interning at like a software venture capital firm, right? And so a good way to replace that, a more specific example with good verbs would be, identified high potential investments by building market maps of the competitive landscape and performing financial due diligence of key B2B SaaS metrics. Right, that's a lot more specific. Before I didn't know like helped find and analyze potential investments. What did that entail? How much did you actually do? What does that actually mean? And the second one is very clear, right? You identify these investments by building out these market maps, and you perform this financial due diligence that helped you find, those good high quality investments. Okay, jumping down to impacts. This is the most important part of your resume and of your bullet points. This showcases what you really did. What impacted these actions that you just described in amazing verbs, great words, what do they actually result in? So, and you want to quantify this wherever possible. Looking at an example here, bad example, conducted a thorough analysis of supplier bids for a product category. Okay, sounds like kind of interesting, but it's again, like, okay, what was this impact here? Did this actually like result in any savings for the company? How many products were you actually working with? How many supplier bids were there? Looking at this better example below, conducted a thorough analysis of 8 supplier bids for 50 products within a struggling product category, resulting in $1.5 million in savings. So much more clear, right? And way more exciting. Okay, there were 8 supplier bids he was looking at for 50 products, and he, discovered $1.5 million in savings. Like, I definitely want that guy on my team, right? That's a lot more powerful than being vague and not explaining and quantifying your impact like that example above. Okay, all right, moving on. Getting into the cover letter. Now switching to Mexican food with enchiladas. Okay, so first wanted to highlight here the purpose, again, of a cover letter. To me, there are 2 overarching purposes of the cover letter. Number 1 is to show your personality and what you bring to the table. And the second is to communicate company fit. A kind of a third purpose can also be to fill gaps on your resume with, like, let's say that you had maybe a poor GPA or maybe not an ideal test score on the ACT or something like that. This is a point where, you can explain a little bit more why that might be, why you might be lacking in that, or why you might be lacking in a particular area with experiences. And you can explain and kind of compensate for those. But again, like the biggest deal here, let your personality come through, show what you bring to the table, and communicate company fit. So those are the purposes you should keep in mind as you're developing your cover letter. Now getting into like the basics of, how actually you should go about this. So similar to the grill of the resume, you need flawless formatting and grammar here. You don't want things sticking out where there's like misspellings here, like weird things with spacing that aren't consistent. You want it to look flawless as far as the aesthetics go. Second point, going back to what I said we go back to, being structured. So we can go to the next slide. It just like throws in a little animation here. So here, go back, sorry. It's just like the one with the little arrows, perfect. How I can make an impact and why BCG is the best fit for me. There was those like little red arrows that popped up. We're gonna dive into this in a second anyway, so it's okay. Perfect, there we go. Oh, it's all right, if they don't stay, it's okay. So that is an amazing way to do your cover letter because consultants love structure. And, when I was running this cover letter by, several different consultants I knew, at BCG, that was the same feedback I got from everyone was like, wow, this is just such a consulting-esque cover letter. Because consultants, they're just structured in their thinking, they're structured in their projects, they're structured in everything they do. And so seeing a structured cover letter like this communicates like, hey, like I already have these attributes and, I am a structured person and can succeed in something like consulting. Do you have to do it this way? No. Do I highly recommend it? Definitely. Okay, going to the next point, creating a unique story or narrative for yourself. Sorry, it's still on the last slide, Erica. You want your personality to come through, and you can do that here by talking about specific experiences and attributes that are like key and core to you. These are real people and they want to come to know who you are as a person. And your cover letter is a great way to be able to do that. Some quick tips and tricks before we dive into a couple of examples here. You want to be specific with the experiences that you talk about, with the people that you mention, etc. Like your resume, you already highlighted some bullets of what you did, what you accomplished. Your cover letter is like a great way to be able to elaborate more on specific experiences that you had and how that reflect and really showcase these attributes that you're trying to communicate to consulting firms. And as far as values go, obviously, you can get that from people that you talk to at the firms, which I'll kind of show an example of that just here in a second. But also, like, feel free to reference values from their website, right? Just look up, BCG's values or mission statement, and like that's pretty easy to find, and you can reference those. And again, trying to show rather than tell, which we just talked about. Okay, moving on to an example. Perfect. How I can make an impact, Taylor's version. So this is a bullet from a section from my cover letter to BCG that I wrote just a couple years ago. So reading through this quick, because I know we're kind of we're getting short on time here, but I am a competitor and I play to win. When my colleagues and I were put into teams during my battery externship, we were told that the team that sourced the most potential deals would be taken to dinner at the restaurant of its choice. The competition was set. Which team could deliver the most value? I knew essentially nothing about tech or venture capital, so I got to work. I spent countless hours poring over our training materials, collaborated with my team, and sourced companies like crazy. Despite my initial lack of experience, I led my team to win the competition. I also discovered that I enjoy learning about new industries and eating at Brazilian grills. Okay, running through some strengths and weaknesses here. So I feel like I did a really good job of creating this narrative for myself, letting my personality come through with my competitiveness, my diligence, liking Brazilian grills, things like that, like letting my personality come through. I also feel like I did a pretty good job of showing instead of telling. A couple of weaknesses. I think I probably could have had a sentence at the end, tying it a little bit more into consulting, how this is going to apply in the work that I'm going to be doing. And I think that like maybe with, as far as like me collaborating with my team, I could have been a little bit more specific. Like, what does that actually mean? What do we actually collaborate on? So jumping to a second example on the next slide, why BCG is the best fit for me. Again, Taylor's version. BCG's care for its people. So BCG sets itself apart by caring about its employees' welfare in both their professional and personal lives. Every BCGer I've spoken with has raved about this. From partners meeting with new associates like Zach Adcock every week just to see how they're doing, to managers helping Misha Putnam's husband find a job in Dallas, BCG emulates sincerity and kindness. My top priority is to work for a company that has me and my family in its best interest, and I believe BCG Dallas does just that. Okay, it's tender, right? I like it. Strengths and weaknesses here. As far as some strengths, I gave some specific examples of people I knew at BCG and specific experience that they had experiencing this, like this sincerity and kindness from BCG. And so I think that was a great thing that I was able to do. I know Zach, I know Misha, I was able to, talk to them about these experiences, and I wanted to mention that and felt like I did a good job being specific with it. As far as like a weakness, I feel like I remember struggling with this and still feel like it didn't come out quite right. The sentence like from partners meeting with new associates like Zach Adcock every week just to see how they're doing. I feel like it's just kind of wordy. And I probably could have like workshopped that a little bit more to be just a little bit more clear, a little bit more concise, so it just flows a little bit better. So that would probably be a weakness identified. But overall, I feel like this was a pretty good example of, talking about company fit, how BCG fits me, how I fit them, how our values, kind of coincide, and we are a good fit for each other. So, okay, now going to a conclusion here. Okay, as a reminder, right, there's these 4 key areas in a resume. these couple of things that we talked about with the cover letter. But moving to the next slide, don't lose the forest for the trees. Don't get overly focused on these like more specific things with a resume and cover letter that you forget about these overarching traits and skills that consulting firms are looking for. Again, they're looking for problem solvers. They're looking for leaders. They're looking for people who are creative when traditional ideas aren't working out, people who are analytical, who are passionate, and who overall have the ability to create positive impact on the projects that they're working on. So that is all I have for you. So we're going to jump now. We can jump into a quick Q&A. So if you have some questions, I know there have been some questions throughout that some of my Leland friends have been helping answer. But if you have a specific question about resumes or cover letters that you would like my advice or thoughts on, feel free to throw them in the chat and I'll see if I can respond to one or two of them in these last couple minutes we have. I see one. Is plagiarism the thing for cover letter sales legit? Well, I appreciate that. I don't know that, but like I would recommend not copying mine. Probably not the best interest for you or for them. But definitely feel free. Like if you want to take that structure that I did with how I can make an impact and then company fit, totally fine and I highly recommend it. Do they actually read the cover letter or is that just scanned? At least with my BCG Dallas experience, as far as I know, they read it. I had people, talk to me specifically about my cover letter and, positive feedback that they gave me from the recruiters about my cover letter. And so I think it's safe to assume they actually read it. Okay, as far as who to address the cover letter to, if you know who the head recruiter is at the firm you're applying to for your school. So for example, like at BCG, like they have a recruiter who deals with all BYU candidates. If you know who that is for you, feel free to address it to them and you kind of like, add, and the members of the BCG recruiting team after her, like his or her name. That's fine. Otherwise, if you're not sure about that, you can just say, dear BCG recruiting team or dear members of the BCG recruiting team. That should be totally fine. Should we use active verbs if we are currently doing it? I would say yes. If that's like an experience that you're still having and things that you're consistently still doing, feel free to use active verbs. Let's see if I'll do one more really quick. Tips on showing impact on your resume. I mean, we talked through a couple of these, but I think that the best one is to quantify wherever possible. So even if that's small things with like, with that example we had, that instead of saying, conducted a thorough analysis of supplier bids, saying, a thorough analysis of 8 supplier bids on 50 products resulting in, $1.5 million in savings. So it's not always going to look exactly like that, but like any numbers that you can throw in there, help them understand like the scope of what you actually did and the impact that it actually had. So I'd say just like really focusing, and as you like go about these experiences that you're having right now, paying attention to things like that and keeping track of them whenever possible. And obviously like with like under your NDA and things that you're like able to keep track of, those things so you can include them in a resume. So I think that's all we're going to have time for right now. But I would love to work together with you. I specialize in this. This is something I love doing. I love working with people, helping them on their resumes and cover letters. I literally was on a call right before this started, helping someone else with her resume and cover letter for an application she's submitting today. So feel free to scan this QR code. I think there's also a link in the chat that Erica just threw in there. And for all of you for attending this session, you get a discount code of 10% off of all of my services. So please reach out. I'd love to stay in contact, love to help you with your resumes and cover letters, as well as casing, networking, your behavioral interviews, anything else, the application process entails. So with that, thank you all so much for attending. And I hope that you can enjoy the rest of the sessions of Consulting Week. Stay in touch, and I'll see you later.